your thoughts on Bill Owens' single tear jumping on the grenade to save 60 Minutes.
I'm going to try and maintain my composure emotionally over everything that just happened. It's not going to be easy, but I'll do my best for your show. I think there's a lot going on here, and there's a few issues that I do want to talk about that are, I think, ancillary to what's taking place, but nonetheless important. I think the primary issue, though, Megyn, is that these people are living in a past that no longer exists. There was one quote that said 60 Minutes is the crowning jewel of broadcast journalism. It was the crowning jewel of broadcast journalism. I remember when I was growing up, and became very interested in politics, even in like my early teens, I used to watch 60 Minutes, and really it was kind of what shaped my admiration for journalism, my desire to be part of journalism. I remember they would take the most powerful people in society, corporate executives and tobacco executives and oil executives and some of the most powerful political officials in the country, regardless of ideology, and they would just grill them mercilessly about questions that they ought to answer. That's what made 60 Minutes so frightening to people, so alarming to people, to the people in power. And they didn't really have a political agenda. They really prided themselves on being purely journalistic. And this is what has happened writ large to our corporate media in general, and they don't realize it or they don't want to accept it, is that they have lost the faith and trust in everybody except for the part of the audience that agrees with them ideologically, which is basically meaningless. I mean, the whole point of 60 Minutes was it gathered all Americans together as a news institution that we all trusted, regardless of party, regardless of ideology. All of those days are gone for almost every single one of these institutions. And the reason they squandered it is not because of the advent of the internet and independent voices. They squandered it because they deservedly squandered it, because they proved over and over that they have a prioritization of a political agenda over their journalistic agenda. The only reason there's an independent media, the only reason you have this gigantic audience, or people like Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson or so many others, the reason we're able to attract a big audience in terms of independent media is not because we manipulated the public into no longer trusting these big corporate media outlets that they used to get their news from and believe it was the truth. It was because they themselves got caught lying so many times. They so transparently renounced their journalistic mission and journalistic agenda in pursuit of a broader political ideology, which I really think began primarily as a reaction to Donald Trump. I mean, the media has always been sort of vaguely liberal, especially on cultural issues. They're based in New York and Washington and the coast. But within that, they could still do a lot of nonpartisan, trans-ideological journalism. Once Donald Trump came, they all collectively began believing that their primary mission was no longer to report the news, to be even-handed in any way. Their primary mission was to stop Donald Trump as a way of saving the republic. And the minute a journalist starts thinking that way, then essentially all of your journalistic neutrality and what gave you the credibility in the first place has evaporated. And these people who are weeping in these newsrooms just can't come to terms with that. They think they've lost something in the last week that they in fact have lost many years ago and no longer have. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that they willingly, voluntarily gave up in an effort to ruin Trump. And we all watched it. I couldn't agree more. I loved 60 Minutes when I was younger. I loved Mike Wallace, and there's no question that Mike Wallace was a committed liberal Democrat. But his reports on 60 Minutes were great and unsparing. And that was still in the age of, the Ed Bradleys of the world, where they did not really believe, or at least they were reined in from showing their hard left partisan nature every week. When that broadcast began. We put this together a while ago. It bears showing again because it's great. But here's a sample of how Mike Wallace used to do journalism while he was on 60.
What means dictatorship?
A dictator is somebody who forcibly, whether it's free press or free religion or free private enterprise, now you're beginning to come a little closer to that. Father knows best. And if you get in the way of Father will take care of you.
Imam President Sadat of Egypt
a devoutly religious man, a Muslim, says that what you are doing now is, quote, a disgrace to Islam. And he calls you, Imam, forgive me, his words, not mine, a lunatic. What they hear, what I heard, was overtones of absolute, you were sticking it to the Jews once again.
That's what good journalism looks like. I mean, he was unsparing. You're sitting across from the Ayatollah and you bust that out on him, like right in people's faces. And instead, what 60 Minutes does now is, if they've got Donald Trump there, they'll have some hard questions for him. But if you've got Barack Obama, you talk about how amazing he is, how wonderful he is, what it's like to be president. If you have Kamala Harris, you do clean up on her answers so she sounds more cogent and together. One of her biggest weaknesses, by the way. So the edit did matter.
I think we all have to begin with humility, even as journalists, and recognize that we all are the byproduct of an endless number of subjective experiences, like where we're born, what our parents teach us, what community we grew up in, what religion we grew up in, how we see our country, how other countries see that. These are all things that, of course, make us imperfect in terms of vehicles for the truth. None of us are infallible vessels of the truth. We're human beings. We see things erroneously all the time. What used to be the high duty of journalism was to, number one, recognize that. So there was no this, fraudulent sense that, oh, yes, we reside above everybody else in our ability to free ourselves of political bias and political subjectivity, but that instead we're going to do the best job possible in our reporting to make sure it's divorced from our political agenda. That has always been what has divided good journalism from bad journalism. And if you don't mind, Megyn, let me just address the point you brought up with the 60 Minutes and the Leslie Stahl and the Donald Trump interview, because this was a crucial moment for me professionally, because I have always been a media critic for a long time. I thought the corporate media was losing its objectivity, was becoming an agenda pursuing entity above all else long before Trump. But that was really a defining moment for me, because I used to think the goal is to criticize journalism with the goal of reforming it so that we could go back to a time when we had major journalistic institutions all of Americans could trust. And that was one of the moments where I really lost that hope and said, no, actually, this is a hopeless project. These days are gone and they're not coming back, because I was working very hard on that Hunter Biden story, on that Hunter Biden laptop. And, we all have talents as journalists. We all have experience as journalists. One of the things I've done most of my career is I work with very large archives of information. I worked a lot with WikiLeaks on those kind of archives. Obviously, the Snowden files, I had several of those in Brazil. And I know how to verify them. I know the journalistic means that are used to verify them. Well before the election, I knew the Hunter Biden laptop was verifiable, was authentic, was genuine, that the information in there was reliable. I had confirmed it in all the ways that we had confirmed these other laptops and these other archives. And so to watch Leslie Stahl say, and she was just mouthing what everybody else in the media was saying, because it was weeks before the election, they didn't want to do anything to jeopardize Biden's chances. Oh, this laptop is not something we can talk about. That it's something we can't verify. They all spread the lie that it was Russian disinformation. And I, of course, ended up leaving my own media outlet because they wouldn't let me report on this archive that I knew for certain was authentic. That was really the moment that showed me that this was not just a kind of progressive incremental problem that one day could be reined in. It was really a fundamental transformation of how these media institutions thought about what their primary mission was. They were very willing, in fact, eager to find lies to justify burying that archive that told us a lot about what Joe Biden and his family did in pursuit of profit in China, profit in Ukraine, all sorts of important questions about the credibility of Joe Biden. But they were so desperate to do anything to make sure that he won that election against Donald Trump, that I watched them all collectively embrace a series of lies to justify burying it and suppressing it. Of course, big tech then censored it too, based on those same lies. And that was when, I left corporate media for good and said independent journalism is the only way to do real journalism, because the pressures politically and culturally on these editors are too great to allow the journalistic mission to be fulfilled.
It's so true. You go back to that period of time. It was like the Hunter Biden laptop not verifiable, even though it's totally verifiable and was later verified even by CBS once everybody else had done it. And at the same time, boosting the Lincoln Project and playing their nasty ads without doing any investigation of the people that they were promoting. Trump loses, Biden takes over, all that hard-hitting stuff goes by the wayside. The focus turns to Ron DeSantis and, boring in on him with a false story. And then it would turn back to Trump. And when Trump won in 2024, of course, we had more of the same. Here's Scott Pelley. This didn't make my little talking points memo, but here he is starting his show in November of 2024, talking about the Trump cabinet picks. Does this sound fair and balanced to you?
This past week, Republicans won the House majority, and President-elect Trump made nominations to his cabinet. Some nominees appear to have no compelling qualifications other than loyalty to Trump. The nominees are Senator Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, he's a combat veteran, most recently a morning show host on Fox News with no government experience. Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. She sought a pardon for Edward Snowden, who leaked U.S. secrets and now lives in Russia. And Robert Kennedy Jr., a skeptic of vaccinations.
I know I've triggered you with the Snowden reference there, but it's all
not
bad.
Not only that, but like the idea was, if you notice how slimy that was, it began with these people have no qualifications, but then each one of them was smeared with some view that if you're a good liberal, you were supposed to hate. Like Tulsi Gabbard has spent her entire career in the U.S. military. She worked her way up to lieutenant colonel. She has every security clearance possible. She was in the Congress for 8 years. She served on the Intelligence and House Armed Services Committee. How is she not qualified for a position in the Intelligence Committee? And of course, you go on with RFK and his entire life, devoted as an environmental lawyer and as a health advocate. So this is, the sort of thing that I think has become so transparent, even to ordinary people who don't pay a lot of attention to this.
Tariff wars, stubborn inflation. No wonder gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs. In volatile markets like the one we have now, do not sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. You can take control and safeguard your savings. That's why so many Americans today are turning to Birch Gold Group. They have helped tens of thousands convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. Is it time for you to hedge against economic instability with gold? To learn how to own physical gold in a tax-sheltered account, text MK to the number 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free, no-obligation info kit. Again, text MK to the numbers 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, Birch Gold has helped so many protect their savings with gold. It took us decades to get into the tangled mess they're trying to unpack now in D.C. How long is it going to take for us to get out of it, and at what cost? Text MK to 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.